My Master Sandals, Chapter 6. There was a time full of strikes in the Dominican Republic. There was repression against students. Any movement that seemed to be against the government was investigated or attacked with military forces. Political chaos never ceased in the history of my country. It seemed like the nations would never be able to grow positively. There were many deaths and casualties because of repression. There was always fight between people and the power. Many laws were generated for those in charge of the country, and they could not be challenged. One afternoon, I went shopping at Comando de Jose. The word Calamando is the name of the grocery store in my country. However, I was unaware there was military surveillance around the block. The government had ordered those in the streets to be shot at this time because they considered people's presence to be retaliation. I, unaware of the military presence, advanced towards the grocery store to buy what I needed. In the distance, I heard someone asking me to stop, and then at the next turn, I heard them again. I was surprised by the group of armed militaries who positioned on the corner. One of the personnel gave me the command to stop, and I didn't because if not, I would be shot. It was difficult to find an exit from there because I still needed to get to where I was going, but I had no turn around to go back the way I had come, that I would be stopped of being targeted. Fear invaded me, and it seemed that moment had come when my life would end. The first thing that came to my mind was run and try to save myself. When things changed in the 10th of a second, this was the only immediate thing I could think of doing. The voice, that deep voice that apparently precisely in my life I had to make this decision, then told me, move forward without stopping. Nothing will happen to you. Walk. It was very different for me to think about the voice, what it was saying to me when I was in the middle of a situation where death was so close. However, deep down, I deeply believed in obeying it. I was aware that it had always been with me, and I should listen to it without hesitation. Then for a second time, the voice repeated to me, keep walking, nothing is going to happen to you. It seemed the time stopped when the voice permeated my ears. The reality of what I lived seemed in the distance itself, hide or disappear from my world, enveloping me in the reality that trapped me in a circle that only I could survive. I lost my fear completely, and I kept walking as the voice had told me. I was aware of what I was doing as I ignored these commands and continued to walk. They warned me again. Stop. You are breaking the law. Obey. I kept trusting without doubting that said be the voice. I did not stop like they were telling me. What was simply going on with Erin became a nightmare. In the distance, I heard them yell, shoot. The order to fire was carried out, and the projectiles began to hum close to my body. The shots did not stop, and for a moment I closed my eyes. I was left to trust, believe, and follow. I raised my head and returned to hear the voice, don't stop. Keep walking. Nothing will happen to you. It was a voice that did not leave me, and I continued with my walk without hesitation. I felt an extreme silence, and I had the impression that someone covered my ears as I advanced, because I did not hear the shots anymore. I was aware that behind me there were military contingents of which I was the target. Still, I walked until I reached the other end of the corner, turning left, losing the military sight. Indeed, that was supposed to happen, was those in the military men were supposed to stop me and take me as prisoner. I was directly disobeying the order, and that was mandatory to the authorities of the country. The profound experience of being so close to death led me to believe that something more was happening to me. Each time the voice accompanied me, often in the most dramatic and terrifying parts of my life. I was always delivered from the situations. What the voice said was always correct. I was learning to trust it more and more. After all, I had no one else I could trust at these times of being alone. I came home very calm, but I did not want to talk about it. After all, I had not complied with my mother's request for the errand. I was relieved that nobody asked me anything. The day normally passed without me saying a single word of what had happened. My Master Sandals, Chapter 5. The martial art films with Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee were one of the most famous protagonists came out of the 70s. These films were the highest level of attendees because of the popular taste. Durante Street had witnessed the existence of its most emblematic theaters, a name that was used in years where the cinema also served as a setting for some of its works. August 4th, 1923, one of the theaters that remained in history and memory in the Dominican town was erected. The Great Rialto Cinema was the only one with 3 levels and was located on Durante Street, reaching El Condo Street. On September 29, 1945, the Max Cinema was one of the most popular within the district. There were large numbers of cinemas throughout the Republic that, with the passage of time, disappeared with the growth of technology and modernization. Those things were beautiful memories for me. Durante Street was very busy with a lot of commerce, full of shops of different types of people who offered their merchandise on an outpatient basis. Crowds were surrounding the entire area and made it almost impossible. It had moved not far away from there to 37 Jose Cabrera Street, and I was filled with nostalgia for so many good and bad things in Villa Faro. A crowd hovered day after day, and there was a street full of items for sale. This is the place where the imagination had no limits. There was lots of disorder, bustle, and chaos. There was a whole separate circle with its own history, often without limits, which came to be known as the oldest global business, prostitution. During the day, Durante Street showed up as us, the popular face of the town that manages to bring bread to the table, that competes hand in hand with the legal merchant, and that flourishes even in economic problems. With the sunset, it becomes something very different, another formula of fight adversity in a way further from the law. The streets would make their way from flowing life of women who sell their bodies to survive, Father had given me money to go to the movies, and I was walking very happily because the movie, The First of the Serpent, starring the famous Jackie Chan, was running every block. I approached to see my idol. Almost at the door, an old guy, about 60 years old, seeing I was approaching, said to me, "Hey boy, I imagine you like karate movies. That's why you're here." Naively I replied, "Yes, I'm a fanatic." The guy continued, "I was expecting my grandson, but he is not coming. It's going to start. I have an extra ticket." The stranger opened his right hand and showed me the ticket. It didn't take long for me to spearhead my shortage of money and my desire to enter, even with the risks that it could entail. All that mattered to me at the time was seeing my favorite artist and seeing him so closely on the big screen that it had kept me practicing. "Thank you, sir. I am so very happy to accept. Thank you." Without measuring any danger that lurked, we entered together. With the appearance of a grandfather with his grandson, we sat in the middle of the cinema without talking much. The seats had some gaps. It was a day in the afternoon. I looked at him a couple of times with a slight smile, showed him my happiness. The man watched me without bad intention, and my desire for the movie to start played on my innocence. At last, everything was in total darkness. The very excited people settled for the performance until the venue was utterly silent. Everything went normally. I made certain movements imitating the protagonist as I was the one in the movie. My deep feeling of martial arts caused me to do this, and with each scene I perceived as very special. At times I forgot that I was in the cinema in the middle of a movie. It was filled with dialogues, emotions, actions. This was a great opportunity for a man of whom I didn't even know his name to begin to carry out what had truly been his objective from the beginning. I deeply absorbed each scene, remained still with my hands clutched at my seat side as I was waiting for the confrontation to begin, or a fight from my favorite artist. My eyes were focused on the screen. Suddenly, I felt a strange heat at the level of my thigh on my right leg. Slowly, I looked down to see what was happening. My breathing began to accelerate, and I became disconnected of what could be happening with Jackie Chan. Not only was this man's hand clinging to my leg, but he began to make morbid movements without any objections. His piercing eyes and uncontrolled gestures accelerated. My reaction was to use my hands in a springboard to jump from the seat and say, "I'm going to the bathroom." I ran away without turning back. No one noticed this event, and I arrived at the curtains that divided the room and exit passageway. However, my love for martial arts was so great that a spectacular noise in the movie made me stop. A fight that started, the actors on the street. The fear that I had just felt from the man in those seconds had disappeared from my mind. I forgot that I had experienced, and I walked to the opposite side without losing my gaze towards the screen. In the middle of the darkness, I guided myself through the curtain that was a temporary hiding place, even resting on my knees on the floor behind an empty seat. For a moment, I could see the man standing to look for me, perhaps nervously about my escape. I remained in the corner until I could know the end of the movie. Without measuring the consequences, I felt contentment that nothing happened. That once the show ended, I went back to the street without looking back, intending to go home safely. For a short time, I did not go on any street. I wanted to forget what had happened. I never knew who that man was either, but what happened remained with me. However, my hobby was stronger than my fear because the announcement of a new movie brought me right back. Martial arts remained part of my daily routine. I did not stop daily practice. Although films of this genre were not very frequent, I had to wait for my father's generosity to be able to acquire a ticket. Then came the day it happened again. With great joy, I received money from him and enlisted to be able to arrive early, as I had to cross the entire busy Durante Avenue. Large crowds invaded the entire perimeter. I would skillfully avoid the crowd when a merchant with quiet integrity interrupted my path, and that other people, socks of all colors, socks for every taste. He was shouting with the boldness and moving wildly. Don't pass up the opportunity to grab your socks. Don't leave without a pair. In both hands, he held what he had to offer. He continued shouting, don't miss out on this opportunity of a lifetime. Colored stockings began to catch the attention of curious people who started to surround him. We have all sizes. Do not leave without a pair. First, I checked to see if I had enough money, even to investigate them. Once I was sure I had enough, I dared to ask, Sir, how much are these socks? Quickly using all of his cunning and arguments, the man convinced me to buy a pair using only a few words. I was left with no time to even respond or to think further, making sure that the price was suitable for me. I continued to purchase the socks with great happiness. This is the best thing I've done today. All of you should be smart as that little gentleman, interrupted salesman finished. I walked to the cinema protecting my new acquisition, although the daylight was still in my favor. I did not want to risk being accused of theft. I hid my precious bag of socks under my arm to make it unnoticeable and continue on my path. I was struggling, although my priority was to watch the movie. I had a particular enthusiasm about enjoying the socks I was bringing home. On the front of the box office, I took out my money I had left and bought my ticket with great care. I came out happy after enjoying the film. Martial arts were my hobby, and I enjoyed the actors' movements in the fights in the scenes. I returned home with the same caution in which I came, hand in pocket and a bag under my arm, always taking care of my valuable socks. The night took over the city. The streets were no longer crowded with people making informal trade. It was now dangerous. Only some restaurants were open during the day serving food were still open as the bar at night. Alcohol and prostitution took over the sector. The lack of security and poor lighting helped them to promote themselves at a high level. Many women offered their services along the entire length of the avenue. Quickening my pace, I crossed the avenue with the intention to get home quickly. I did not want to expose myself to any danger, and I was very eager to see the colored stockings on my feet. I did not finish turning the corner when one of them, a brunette in a short dress, that was tight around her body and had a lot of gloss on her lips, cut off my path. Her legs were revealed and she was wearing an exaggerated neckline where her voluptuous breasts escaped. Very quickly taking my hand, she started a conversation. "Where are you going, beautiful boy? Come with me. I'm going to take you to paradise. I'm going to show you a delicious little things." Of course, I listened to her politely, but I did not let her see my bag of socks that I kept hidden. The woman finished offering me her services without explaining anything that was going on. I had no chance to take over the situation, and she ended up taking me with her. I was pretty fearful because of the speed of the actions. I didn't know what to say to her, and without opening my mouth, I just followed her without taking any appropriate actions. She talked to me of how nice I seemed to her. Of course, it was part of her job to win the clients with compliments. I had never had a consensual sexual relationship before, much less with a prostitute. I had no idea how to get rid of the situation, and the act caused me to fear, but at the same time curious to be living this type of experience. After walking a short distance together along an unknown path, we entered a rather dark alleyway. The place was familiar to her, and she navigated the area without any difficulty. We arrived in front of the door, where she stopped and invited me to enter. We walked into a dark and battered room. Dominating the moment, the woman, who had realized my nervousness and innocence, began to ask me if I had had a sexual experience. "My baby, you have had relations with any woman?" At the moment, my concern was based on holding my bag with my stockings, but she insisted on getting an answer. "The truth is, ma'am, I imagine you hadn't, with the innocent face and all, my beautiful doll." The minutes passed and she continued her seduction process. I did not know if I had to pay any money. I was just worried that she didn't notice that I had a bag under my arm. She spoke in my ear, kissing me from behind, from the neck to the shoulders, trying to take off my shirt. So little by little she undressed me, all while talking. She undressed fully and I remained silent without reaction, although excited, letting myself be carried away by the experience that a woman showed me. Between feeling sacred and worried at the moment, she began to insinuate herself more and more daring, looking for more excitement from me after undressing. I just managed to hide my sock bag under my clothes so that it was not exposed. The woman was still doing her job and earning my trust and enthusiasm. I was about to have my first relationship, the peak moment of a young man, the one that remains with him for life, and the one that becomes a memorable antidote. The story that we are proud of, which allows us to say that we are now true men. Suddenly somebody interrupted, knocking on the door with great eagerness. The scandalous sound awakened my nerves, but the woman tried to calm me. "Here's my husband. Take it easy." Undoubtedly, her words did not have a positive effect on me, and a cold sweat began to run over my naked body. She told me I just have to give my husband something valuable so that he's not upset. It was a way for him to control me. If I didn't give him anything, he's going to be mad. The only thing of value that I had was the bag with my socks that I had taken so much care of. The rest of the money were used for movie tickets. The woman began to rummage through my clothes without being able to find anything of value. I watched her when all I wanted was to run away from this place. Then she noticed my bag. The man knocked again, and with the same force. "Wait a moment, love. I'll open the door for you," she said. He entered and stared at me, and pointing out my only valuable belongings. "Leave me your bag and go through the door behind you. Don't worry, no one will do anything to you." Without waiting for another option, I took my clothes and followed the path he pointed out to me. I opened the back door and ran out of the room. I was starting to become overwhelmed with sadness of losing my precious socks that I liked so much, that I had taken such good care of. I came out of the neighborhood shaking off the bad experience. I found some friends talking on the corner. I was unable to let my face show the anger and bitterness towards what had just happened to me. So they questioned me. "What happened to you? Why that face?" I began to narrate what happened with the woman in sufficient detail. They waited patiently until the end, believing that it would end in a morbid story of the encounter with the prostitute, since she seized my virginity in a night of lust. I was only an inexperienced boy, but the only one I caused my friend was laughter. "Why are you laughing?" was my immediate question. It didn't seem funny to me that this had happened. I'm not even done with the story, and yet you laughed? The truth is that the anger inside of me did not inspire any kind of funny situation. My friend's attitude were filling me with impatience. More calmly, after the annoyance passed, my friends explained that this was a familiar way for those women to operate, to steal from inexperienced and naive people. I was the one of those unwary people who joined their list. To be honest, what hurt me the most was losing my precious colored socks. My Master's Sandals, Chapter 7. Yorito, my neighborhood friend, who was good-natured, humorous, mostly contemptuous, indescribable, and liked to make fun of people, was about 3 or 4 years older than me. He was part of the group of boys who met to talk in the corners of the streets. The group saw me and always passed on my way to my daily practice. One day I left the house earlier than usual. I saw everyone in the group was in an enjoyable conversation. I stopped to talk to them for a moment. Yorito showed off by talking about his adventures and filled everyone with his anecdotes, wrapped in laughter and mystery. Everyone in the group, of course, listened attentively, including me. This time he talked about a culinary experience and the diversity of food that his mother prepared at home. Many of his stories had quite peculiar characteristics. Most of them were widely inventive and imaginative, which is why everyone enjoyed them. In the middle of his talk, Yorito interrupted my speech and he said, "Boys, today at my house, my mom is preparing duck drowned in wine." Most of us were of humble conditions, and hearing the name of such an exotic and unknown dish for our tables, we were quite interested. Duck drowned in wine? All of the boys repeated in unison, Yorito confirming the prestigious menu broke the meeting and ran to his house without realizing that the curious boys began to chase him. Indeed, such an incredible range of food names could only have been created by Jorgito's fantastical mind. We went through several blocks with care, and that he did not discover us until we reached the rather long alley where Jorgito lived. Then he entered the apartment without suspecting anything. We cautiously approached and focused safely on his house. We advanced slowly, crouched in a single file to observe an open window. We could hear the raking of the brush, which was a typical movement of people washing clothes by hand. In my country, having a washer machine only belonged to a particular social class, which was still a privilege we were far from reaching. As we peered through the window, we find the famed menu. We saw his mother, who is doing the hard work, washing clothes by hand, only helped her brush. A little sacred but only sudden appearance, the lady looked at us and said, "What's going on? What are you guys doing here?" Having no alternative, not one of my friends responded, "Ma'am, excuse me, and good afternoon. We don't want to disturb you, but we just wanted to know how you are preparing duck drowned in wine for lunch today." The lady took it its mockery towards her, and in a few words her face changed. She threw the brush in the foam-filled sink, and she angrily answered, "Duck drowned in nothing. There is no drowned duck. We are going to eat pico and pala, which means the head and legs of the chicken. And you come to me with your blessed duck who drowned? I don't know what you're talking about." The out-of-control lady continued, "Get the hell out of here and out of my sight, you spoiled boys." At that moment, we wanted to explain to her that it was Jorgito who had filled us with curiosity about this fantastic dish. We were only trying to find out if it was real. The magnitude of her bitterness would not allow her to listen to us, and we had to run before the lady reached us. Jorgito was absent for a few weeks after that. He did not feel like talking after what happened. Jorgito was one of those guys who enjoyed looking for defects in others. Week after his absence, he began to frequent us again. This time, the harassment and teasing was directed towards me and my martial art practices. Each time he made a joke in front of his group of friends, I only took it with a brief smile. They unleashed the desires to make me angry when they found I was taking it calmly and was not bothered by the insult jokes. This taunting began to become more frequent and severe. The taunts were more excessive at each meeting for quite some time. One day, my patience has reached its limits, and I challenged Jorgito to a fight. Between my confidence and bitterness I felt, I had told Jorgito that I would challenge not only him, but 4 more boys that I would designate to fight alongside him. This totaled 5 people against me. I was still very fond of Jackie Chan and his martial art films at the time. I had also not stopped practicing my martial arts. I had ramped up my skills and was practicing them with a new group commanded by my friend named Jackson. Even though he was very young, he was a big guy, and he stood over 6 feet tall and weighed about 275 pounds. We did all the practice on the hill, each time seeking to get closer to perfection and to improve the technique, since martial arts are very complex. At that time, I was also a disciple of a young teacher named Puro, who was a highly respected person in martial arts. He was a lonely guy who was very quiet and spoke little, but he was very disciplined in what he did. Me winning every fight was what connected me under his teaching. Rojito, as usual, did not take this seriously and did not stop making fun of me, challenging him. He took my words as a simple way of believing to myself to be much braver than the others. Naturally, my practices continued, usually by the time I used a little more concentration. I was aware that I was at a level that could cause Rojito harm, so I was preparing just to give him a lesson and prevent my friend from ridiculing me forever. The fight was set to occur for an afternoon when Rojito appeared with 4 other people who accompanied him according to what we had agreed. It was reasonably a hot day with very little wind. We went up the mountains that would be the right place. The group of friends surrounded the space that was to be our ring. I was very sure of myself, calm, and made that Rojito's didn't start with any unfair surprises. His group observed me. Rojito always believed himself to be more cunning. He had brought acquaintances from another neighborhood to watch our fight and to show them who he would humiliate me. He was also counting on mutual friends to cheer for him instead of me. I was the only one, the first step forward. Without saying a word, I raised my arm in challenge. The 5 began to surround me, making sure to cover all sides. Rojito approached without stopping, saying, "We are going to beat you up, and you are going to want to continue this." Still looking in his eyes, I didn't say a single word. "I'm going to give you one last chance to quit. You can stop, and I'll let you go and won't do anything to you." The others began to smile outrageously, raising the challenger's credit. Well, I see you don't want to listen to me. I'm going to feel very sorry for you. Don't go saying that I didn't give you a chance to save yourself. At least my conscience will be clear. Rojito's words only filled me with concentration. I closed my eyes for a second, leaving my arms up in position. I opened them with a little turn of the head, calculating each of those around me. I was ready and prepared. The cries of friends went quiet. The other 4 I chose to fight alongside Rojito faked an action, but expected him to start fighting officially. The time has come. I'm very sorry, my friend, but you asked for it. Come at me. The order reached my ears like a shotgun in the air. My concentration was at its full level, and 5 came at me from all angles. This brought me to a magical reaction of my knowledge of martial arts. Rojito was the first to fall from my very effective tactics. Then the second, the third, the 4th, until the last one bowed without even touching me. One by one, they received stagnant blows that made them succumb with great subtlety. Each fell without being able to react, biting the dust of that mountain. They all witnessed the audacity of a friend who paid dearly for his teasing always at my expense. The group of boys, surprised at what had been, cheered my name, wrapping me in hugs and smiles. This ended Jorgito's legacy, and I gained respect without any discussion. Jorgito fell, and without giving up his pride, which was always present to me. It was a joke. I didn't know you were going to take me seriously. I looked at him without saying a word. It was our mutual friends who took care of him. After a time that I had been harvesting tournaments, my dedication had finally paid off. There was intense hours of preparation in leading a strict personal life. I took care in creating my meals specifically, and also taking good care of myself physically. The time came when I recommended to go to a monk, a friar level in martial arts. One of my instructions took the initiative to explain to me that the steps that must be taken to reach this level. One day I was given the possibility of experimenting and meeting a teacher of a higher level. With great enthusiasm we arrived. The road was quite long and tedious, but it was worth the sacrifice. I was introducing myself to another stage that filled me with so much joy. I arrived with high spirits of wanting to know the world of martial arts even more deeply. My teacher knocked on the door of the place. A young man in traditional dress opened the door for us, very cordially invited us to enter. We crossed a small entrance to well-kept gardens. Without saying a word, the only sign in the right hand, we received a kind welcome, and we were presented to the master. I introduced myself very cheerfully with a lot of respect before the cautious eyes of a man who did not flinch at my presence. Removing the smile from my lips, I said goodbye to the teacher and showed me a slight strange look. The master invited me to follow him. We walked down a small corridor past the door into a reasonably large space called the temple. Many young people sat in the utmost silence, forming a circle. The master invited me to sit down in the corner outside the space of where the others were. He cordially pointed out a particular place for me, and I sat still, waiting for some other direction. I was very excited about this new experience. Having reached the Pacific experience was very gratifying to me. I had received clearance to learn the new level, and I was going to achieve more satisfaction than I had previously. The weight burned my anxiety a little, seeing that the masters began to address everyone around him when I was the only one kept in the corner without any kind of attention. It was a beautiful reality to have the opportunity to train with a true hero in martial arts. The minutes passed, and I was still sitting in the same way where I had entered. I hoped that at any moment my long-awaited turn to join the others would come. I was impatient to begin learning. After almost 2 hours at last, the master approached me. The emotions began to fill my body because I was about to start one of my biggest dreams. I looked at him with much respect when I felt his hand on my shoulder. The feeling was incredible. The master was relatively soft and polite, told me, "Thanks for coming. I'll be waiting for you at this time tomorrow." The calmness of which he thanked me for sitting in the corner without even participating, causing me a feeling of frustration. Still, at the same time, I appreciated his education and loved that he took notice of me to say thank you. I stood up and walked out slowly, clenching my teeth because I wanted to scream barbarically from frustration. I was so upset that I had to leave without learning a single thing that day. That night, I thought I'd never get back to my master's words, which made me understand that he still trained me. He made me fight against my negative attitude. At the end of the next day, I gathered my strength, left again, this time without the teacher's company. I arrived and knocked at the door. Very kindly, the man tended to me and allowed me to enter. I followed the same steps of the previous day. I was sure that I was going to participate with the rest of the students today with the same charismatic calmness. The master invited me to sit in the same corner. Nobody came to say a word to me yet again. Perhaps he could have at least allowed me to ask a question or explain to me what I was not being trained. I didn't understand the silence was part of the master's teaching style or not. He left me observe all the practice. I was not taken into account at all. I started to take this with a bit of an attitude, although with some confusion. Every moment I waited to be called forth, this was an opportunity to be in a sports practice that fulfilled my desire to learn and become a great karate fighter. But the minutes ticked by without the long-awaited invitation from the master. So I sat there silently a second time. In the end, the master approached me gently. I was continuous gazed at him, looking for some explanation for why I was experiencing this, experiencing it since it was severely anticlimactic. Again, he said, "Thanks for coming. I'll be waiting for you at this time tomorrow." I didn't know if it was going to be okay for me to feel hatred or frustration so naturally. Maybe I should have just smiled, but intentionally to calm myself down, but I didn't. I opted to stand up to say goodbye and go home. The karate movies, they taught me that you have to be thankful and have patience so that the movements learned would be exact and calculated. Also, a lot of practice is needed that one accurately responds to crucial moments. On the third day, I left my negative thoughts behind and I decided to put everything aside. I became sure that at this point, the teacher would take into account and allow me to join the practices. Without realizing it and becoming accustomed to sitting in the corner, the days went by until 3 months had passed. I had not joined a single practice. Every day I heard the master say, "Thanks for coming. I'll be waiting for you tomorrow at this time." Enough though. I heard it that day after day. I still felt encouraged because he never said to me, "Don't come here anymore," or "Thanks, but I don't need you anymore." I patiently awaited my prize of being able to practice. After practice one day, the master went to the corner and he said to me, "To practice martial arts, it is essential to have patience and to be able to control emotions. I am delighted that you have achieved it." He touched my shoulder and showed real satisfaction on his face. I was grateful for his calm and wise words. It was one of the happiest days of my life. Those words became written in my memory forever. I spent an average of 6 years practicing Aikido and Taekwondo, which were the first martial arts available to me. Then I began Kung Fu in another school for 5 years.